This story is called Whispers in the Basement. Emma Stiller hated the basement. At 10 years old, she was old enough to know basements weren't actually haunted, but young enough to believe they could be. In the dim, dusty light of the naked bulb, every shadow seemed to stretch just a little too far, linger just a little too long. And it was down there, one chilly Saturday afternoon, that Emma found the door. The door was old, built right into the wall, with rusted hinges and a metal lock that was cool to the touch. It was small, barely taller than Emma herself, and looked as though it hadn't been opened in years. Her dad had been fixing something with the furnace, muttering under his breath about the plumbing, when she'd noticed it half buried behind a stack of forgotten boxes. "Dad?" she asked, her voice echoing in the quiet. "Did you know there's a door over here?" Her father stopped mid-grumble and came over, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion, and then something darker. "What in the hell?" he murmured, almost to himself. "I've never seen this here before." He reached out to the door, and for a brief moment his hand hesitated in midair. Emma felt a chill creep down her spine as her dad forced the lock open with a grating twist. The door groaned as it swung inward, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Her dad grabbed a flashlight, shining it down the steps. The light seemed to vanish into the shadows. "There's nothing down there," he said, a little too quickly, shutting the door and latching it with a sigh of finality. "Let's keep it that way." That night, as Emma lay in bed, she couldn't get the image of that dark staircase out of her head. There was something almost alive about that darkness, something that had looked back at her in the beam of her dad's flashlight. A soft noise echoed through the house, so faint she almost missed it. It was coming from downstairs, low and hushed. The words twisted and distorted, as if someone was speaking through a wall of water. "Emma." Her blood turned cold. The voice was thin, fragile, and it seemed to scrape against her ears like a whisper from a different world. In her pajamas and bare feet, she crept down the stairs, clutching her flashlight with trembling hands. Each step she took toward the basement seemed to throb with dread, yet she couldn't stop herself. The whispering grew louder, closer, as if something was pacing behind that old wooden door, just waiting for her to reach it. She swung the basement door open and flicked on the light. Her stomach clenched as she saw the tiny door at the back of the basement was open again. The darkness yawned from the open doorway, deeper and thicker than she remembered. Emma took a step towards it, then another, until she was right at the edge of the stairs. "Emma." The voice was unmistakable now, a ghastly imitation of her father's voice, twisted and desperate. "Come help me. I'm down here. Don't leave me down here in the dark." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her dad was asleep upstairs. She was certain of it. She'd heard him snoring just before she crept out of bed. "No," she whispered, stepping back, her heart pounding as the voice shifted, becoming darker, more insistent. "Emma, come closer." The voice dropped to a growl, filling the silence with a rising frenzy that sounded like claws against stone. Emma turned and bolted upstairs, slamming the basement door behind her. She threw herself into bed, tugging the blankets over her head, squeezing her eyes shut. But the sounds didn't stop. She heard scratching at the door, a faint laugh, and worst of all, the muffled echo of her own name, called again and again. The next morning, her parents found her huddled under her covers, pale and silent. She told them everything, but they brushed it off as a nightmare. Days passed. Emma refused to go into the basement, and each night she heard that scratching, that whisper calling her name, growing louder, as if the thing behind the door was growing bolder. On the fifth night, Emma's dad decided enough was enough. He'd go down to the basement himself, lock the door, and prove to her once and for all that there was nothing to fear. As her dad disappeared down the stairs, Emma stood at the top, clutching her flashlight. She heard him mutter, his voice fading as he moved deeper into the basement. Then, nothing. For a few seconds there was complete silence. Then, she heard his scream. It was sharp, chilling, filled with a terror she'd never heard before. She called his name, her voice breaking as she stumbled down the stairs, but her father was gone. The door at the bottom stood open, revealing the darkness within. And somewhere down there, she heard a voice, thick and heavy, calling her name.